extraordinary moment to see them come together. They were also together at the Carter funeral, Jimmy Carter's funeral last week, and everyone watching the body language as not only the Bidens and Vice President Kamala Harris and Doug Hemhoff arrive there in the church, but as all of the former presidents and first ladies gather in the church. There you see stills from this morning inside the church there. That is St. John's, of course, not far from Blair House, where the Trump family stayed again this time. They stayed there 8 years ago. There's the incoming Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife. He'll be taking the oath of office here later this morning. We have seen a lot of J.D. Vance, but we've seen even more of Elon Musk, and we'll talk about that here this morning as well. A lot of folks have asked, who is actually the closest advisor? Is it J.D. Vance or is it Mr. Musk? In fact, we've seen often Musk with his son, though he has several children, but with his son with the Trumps in recent weeks at Mar-a-Lago, and of course here in Washington as well. Terry Moran, that is really extraordinary to see. The President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And you have to imagine there might have been some tense weeks there when she was the top of the ticket. But remember that phone call he made within hours of her going public with this, in the middle of her first sort of talk to the voters. He was on speakerphone saying, "I've got your back. I'm with you all the way." And here in the end, to greet each other there on the steps and now await the incoming administration, the incoming president.
It's a remarkable tableau, isn't it? Two president, vice president, both of them had run for office, and there was tension in those days, those weeks, apparently. Kamala Harris really, in many ways, turned her back on Joe Biden. She didn't run on the Biden record as much. It was hard to say in sometimes what she ran on, but in that picture there, the president and the vice president together again, doing the right thing, engaging in the peaceful transfer of power there, ready to greet President Trump, President-elect Trump, in a way that obviously, as you said, hadn't been done 4 years ago. You know, they tried to keep it together and fell just short the Democratic ticket there. I don't think we've ever seen a tableau like that on an inauguration day. And looks like bygones are bygones now.
Our live cameras trained on St. John's. You're not going to miss a moment here. The moment that the Trumps emerge from the church, we'll bring that to you. In fact, here it is right here. The incoming president, he will be the 47th president, as you know, after having been the 45th. There is the First Lady, Melania Trump, soon to be First Lady again, emerging from that church. They stayed at Blair House, I mentioned a moment ago, and that's where they stayed 8 years ago, though there were questions right up until the 11th hour about whether or not they would stay there. Donald Trump's body man went and saw it ahead of time and said, "You know, Mr. Trump, it's small. It's small." He knows what Donald Trump looks for wherever he stays, and Donald Trump most comfortable staying in his own bedrooms, if you will, at his own properties. And I believe in the end it was Ivanka Trump who brought sheets from the Trump International Hotel here in Washington over to Blair House. Mary Jordan with us from the Washington Post executive editor, also an ABC News contributor. Mary, you remember when he wasn't quite sure if Blair House was going to do it for him, but he ended up doing it anyway.
The Secret Service had to convince him to stay at Blair House. You know, where you know, I mean, Churchill, the Queen of England, it was good enough for so many foreign leaders. And he's like, well, I have the Trump Hotel. I like my own bed. And so, you know, Ivanka got some things from the other hotel, including the sheets, brought them over. But he didn't sleep that night, I was told. He was up all night. He was walking around. He was like, there's so many grandkids here. And, you know, I have so many houses, you know, but under one roof, right? I mean, he has Mar-a-Lago, Bedminster, the Trump Tower, and now the White House. So normally the Trump family doesn't bed in overnight. They were all last night in Blair House, as they were in 2017, and Donald said there was too much commotion, too much going on. So we'll see if he looks a bit more rested this time.
If he got any sleep at Blair House this time, if he let the grandchildren, as many of the grandchildren maybe come to Blair House. But again, he did decide to return, as is tradition. Blair House, of course, is kept up by the Department of State that for, as Mary mentioned, visitors to this country, other heads of state, members of other governments. We did just see moments ago the incoming president and the incoming First Lady, Donald Trump, Melania Trump, leaving St. John's there after the morning service. We also know over at the White House moments ago, President Biden and the First Lady greeting Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff. Here's the moment again, a short time ago, the Trump family emerging from the church. And what this must be like for them, John Carl, to be back 8 years later, returning to that church, having spent the night at Blair House, and having left amid so many questions and amid those poll numbers that were so low after January 6th, and the country truly divided. It still is, but divided, and the world had watched that play out. And now to return 8 years later, and he's calling the shots, he's doing the inviting. It's quite a remarkable course of events over the last 4 years.
You know, Donald Trump has never been in a stronger position than he is right now. His approval rating among the American people is higher than it ever was during his presidency, higher than when he took the oath of office 8 years ago. And we've talked about it as this greatest comeback in the history of American politics. I mean, you have to consider not just because he lost 4 years ago, but because he didn't accept that loss. He faced an impeachment for how he tried to stop that loss from being certified by the Congress. He then faced federal prosecutions, local prosecutions in Georgia and New York. And through it all, he comes and he wins a victory bigger than his victory 8 years ago. He wins a victory where he won every single battleground state.
And the popular vote, John.
And he won the popular vote, which is something no Republican presidential candidate has done in a generation. It's not since George W. Bush's reelection in 2004. And there he is at Blair House. And one other point about Blair House, David, he stayed there last time, as you mentioned, the day before the inauguration. There was an incident. It was never reported on at the time because it's highly shrouded in secrecy. But while he was at Blair House, before he was sworn in, he was taken out the back door. There's a courtyard back there. And he was taken to meet what they call the mill aid. And there are actually a half dozen of them. But these are the military aides that carry the nuclear football wherever a president goes. And he got a briefing on how the nuclear football works. This is the nuclear codes. This is literally how a president of the United States could initiate the process of a nuclear attack. And he was quite interested in this briefing. Now he comes back. I'm not sure he's going to need that briefing this time. He knows exactly what the nuclear football is. And he also knows exactly what it is like to come in as a new president. This is a president with experience. This is a president who knows how it is done. And he is also a president that is not going to be relying on the advice and counsel as much, anywhere near as much as he did last time around of his aides.
It's so interesting, John. You remember the interview that I did with the president right after the inauguration. It was the first interview inside the Oval Office. He took us through the West Wing, but that was one of the questions as we walked down the portico there about the nuclear biscuit, what that was like. Yes. And for an incoming president who's never served in the military or in political office before. Remember, that's how he arrived in Washington, as you know, in 2017. Very different now, 8 years later, having been president before. But I asked him about that moment he was given the codes and it was explained how this would work. Was that a sobering moment? And he said, when they explain what it represents, the kind of destruction that you're talking about, it is a very sobering moment, very scary in a sense. And I asked him if it kept him up at night, that first night, and he said, no, but I have confidence I'll do the right thing. But it is a very scary thing, is what Donald Trump said to me. The motorcade now on the move, but as John rightly points out, a very different situation 8 years later. He has been president once, so he'll be briefed again on how this works, the military aides who will handle that nuclear code, and obviously the weight of that responsibility is very much the same, and perhaps even elevated a bit given all of the conflict around the world that we have witnessed, even over the last just couple of years. But he'll know this time how it works. And even that question from me 8 years ago might be moot this time around, because so much of what he'll see today is something that he has expected. One of the things he did not expect, perhaps, was that announcement from President Biden a short time ago, these pardons for Liz Cheney, for General Mark Milley, for Dr. Anthony Fauci, among others. The outgoing president, President Biden, making it clear in his announcement today that he believes that none of them did anything wrong, but he is preemptively protecting them from any sort of retribution that might have come their way, given the fact that Donald Trump will soon be the 47th president of the United States. Now, what's unclear here, and maybe the control room can tell me, we weren't sure if they were going back to Blair House or if they were heading to the White House. We still don't know yet. We can show you that image from moments ago, and it was an extraordinary one at the White House. The Biden family, President Biden, the First Lady, greeting Vice President Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff. And again, for as much as what will be made today about the interaction between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, that's one relationship. This is a relationship in and of itself that has been studied too. Joe Biden selected Kamala Harris. They competed against each other in a primary, and she was tough. She was tough up against Joe Biden. He ended up winning. She dropped out of the primary very early on. But once he chose her, he was all in. He talked about what she would bring to the ticket, and she made history. Obviously, as the first woman of color to serve as vice president here in the United States. The motorcade on the right side of your screen, live pictures right there on the right of the motorcade on the move. We'll see where they're headed at this point. On the left, of course, the Bidens, along with the vice president, who did make history. And she has talked publicly about that call from Joe Biden over the summer, Mary Bruce, when he said to her, I am going to be stepping down from the top of the ticket. And it was not long after, I think it was 20 minutes or so, online, and he chose to do it on social media, I believe on X, formerly Twitter, where President Biden said, I stand behind my vice president 100% as top of this ticket.
And then it kicked off that 107-day sprint. And what a bittersweet day this has got to be for Kamala Harris and for Joe Biden. But certainly, it is not the day that Kamala Harris had envisioned. I mean, not since Al Gore have we seen a vice president have to be there for this inauguration to pass the baton to the man who just defeated her. And yes, Joe Biden was, once he made that decision that he was going to bow out of his bid for re-election, he was 100% behind Kamala Harris. And yet, even in recent days, David, Joe Biden has said he still thinks he could have defeated Donald Trump. You can imagine how that must have not sat pretty well with Kamala Harris. But Joe Biden still insists that he could have done this. He could have beaten Donald Trump. It is remarkable given the way in which he was pressured by his own party to drop out. Of course, a move that he thought at the time would really help cement his legacy, that he was going to be remembered for putting country ahead of party, ahead of his own personal interests. Instead, today, I think you are seeing a lot in the Democratic Party and perhaps many of the president's supporters questioning the role that Joe Biden played in the return of Donald Trump, in this remarkable resurrection of Donald Trump, and the mark that will have on Joe Biden's legacy.
The main question is, if he was going to drop out, why wait that long?
Exactly.
And to hand her a monumental task, 107 days, to try to pull this off. If you talk to members of her team, including David Plouffe from the Obama years, he'll say, we pulled the Democrats out of a deep hole. We just couldn't get the Democrats across the finish line. Live pictures here, the Trump family returning to Blair House. This is their day. 8 years after first coming to Washington, they are back, and you will not miss a moment here. The moment they go to the White House and interact with the Bidens, we'll have it live. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with ABC News live coverage, the second inauguration of Donald Trump, the 47th president of the United States. We'll be right back.
ABC News live coverage of the second inauguration of Donald J. Trump returns in a moment.
With a home warranty from American Home Shield, you can find your happy place no matter what happens around your place.
No hot water? No worries.
When unexpected breakdowns pop up, we'll be there to fix or replace your covered appliances and home system parts. There's a reason why homeowners have trusted us for over 50 years to keep homes running smoothly.
Heck yeah, the fridge is leaking.
Don't worry, be warranty. American Home Shield.
If a man really hated ads, here's what he would do. Day 1, he would install Pi on his computer without spending a dime because it's 100% free. Day 2, he realizes how clean and clutter-free his browsing experience has been since he got Pi. He doesn't have to deal with annoying cookie pop-ups or targeted ads. Day 3, he can finally binge YouTube and Twitch without interruption because Pi works on every website you visit on Chrome. Day 4, he discovers that when he does see ads, he can get paid to see them. Day 5, his life has improved 1,000 times because of the peace he gets from experiencing an ad-free internet. He decides he never wants to go back to life without Pi and tells all his friends and family to download it. See how Pi can improve your life today.
Did you know that you can have permanent teeth in just 24 hours? That's right. Only 24 hours and your new smile is ready. And with affordable payment options, achieving your dream smile has never been easier. Forget waiting months with temporary teeth or those insanely uncomfortable dentures. Backed by over 20,000 five-star Google reviews and winners of the 2024 Dental Implant Restoration Company of the Year, Nuvia is helping people regain their smiles and change their lives. And the best part, it all happens in only 24 hours. Take the 60-second quiz now to find out if Nuvia dental implants are right for you.
America's most watched newscast.
We told you we would keep you abreast of every development right up to the minute. Look at this. Moments ago, First Lady Jill Biden saying one last photo, a selfie right outside the White House there with the outgoing president, President Joe Biden and Jill Biden. The tweet just moments ago. We were trying to figure out, it must be the president's arm, right? Because he's in the foreground there. Who pulled off this selfie? One last selfie from the White House. They're moments away from greeting the Trumps. J.D. Vance set to arrive at the White House with his wife, the incoming second lady, second wife, and we'll have that for you right after the break here. So don't go away. Live coverage in a moment.
Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. It turns out one of the fastest growing segments of people signing up for Mint are people over the age of 55. So I've decided to call our 55 plus plan the retirement plan. That's it. I thought that was pretty clever. But we're not going to go with that, right? Because at 55, people are just getting started. You just paid off your student loans. You could be a bachelor at 70 these days. I mean, those seniors, like rabbits.
Pursue your passion for working with animals and prepare for an in-demand career in veterinary healthcare, all at your own pace. Open the door to new opportunities with Penn Foster's affordable online vet tech associate degree.
Welcome back. You're watching ABC News Live coverage, the inauguration of Donald Trump. You can see Vice President Kamala Harris, Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, greeting the incoming Vice President J.D. Vance and his wife, Usha Vance. J.D. Vance, the third youngest to serve as Vice President. Richard Nixon was 40 years old when he was Vice President for Eisenhower. Very warm exchange there between the one-time competitors just a few weeks ago. Always very interesting. And which side to stand on? What's the protocol here? And Usha Vance was fairly quiet on the campaign trail, Lindsay Davis. It'll be interesting to see as Second Lady what she'll make of that role. And there they are at the White House together.
Of course, Usha Vance and J.D. Vance met at Yale Law School together. Usha, on her own right, quite a successful attorney. She has actually stepped back from the firm once J.D. made the announcement that he was going to be the running mate here. But quite often, she is said to be an advisor of her husband. It was her who has suggested that he actually go forward with writing Hillbilly Elegy, his memoir, which became a bestseller and ultimately a movie that was out on Netflix. But it said that she quite often is a private person, primarily because they have 3 children, the oldest who's just 7 years old, and she really is trying to keep them out of the public eye at this point.
Unclear what this ambulance is that's in the foreground here, but we've been given no indication that there's anything to worry about here. As you can see, this is from, I believe, the Capitol that we're looking at right now, the Capitol Rotunda. And we're watching the performance that was expected to take place here this morning inside the Rotunda as dignitaries begin to gather there. The University of Nebraska-Lincoln Combined Choir performing 120 members. This is as folks begin to file into the Rotunda. Again, the big change today. First time since Ronald Reagan in 1985 that we're going to watch an inauguration play out indoors because of the weather. It's kind of interesting. Ronald Reagan had the warmest inauguration and the coldest inauguration, Martha.
Yeah, in fact, I was there in 1985, and it was just the night before when they announced that it would move inside. As you can imagine, kind of complete chaos for that time. And yet there was a dignity to that inside that Capitol Rotunda. It's kind of like what we're seeing now, too. There were several people out on the streets yesterday who I talked to who had been invited. They were going to be on the reviewing stand, on the stand behind Donald Trump. I said, are you going to be there? You're not going to be there now. Are you going to get inside? They're like, we don't have a chance of getting inside because it's so small. But they came anyway. They just wanted to be part of the celebration in the city, a celebration you can really feel, David, just walking around yesterday and talking to people with their Trump hats on. It was very much a throwback, and yet it felt very, very different. Obviously, 4 years ago, he lost. This time he won, and the people felt that and are supporting it, and you can see that all across the country.
And Mark Updegrove, our presidential historian, ABC News consultant, as Martha mentions, a lot of Trump supporters here in Washington overjoyed that he's returning now 8 years later after his loss 4 years ago. And of course, the question is, will he be different? And the country is different. There are a lot of expectations for him. He has a Republican Senate, Republican House, though by very slim margins. But the first sort of order of business, even before these executive actions later today, will be the inaugural speech. And, you know, there's a lot at stake with how he delivers this. We remember the carnage speech of 8 years ago. What do you think he could potentially pull off here today in this effort to try to bring this country together?
Well, he talked about that when he won the election. He talked about the fact that we need to unify as a country. We are a deeply divided nation right now, partly because of Donald Trump, partly because of what we saw play out 4 years ago, the insurrection on the Capitol on January 6th, the very divided nature with which he governed in his first term in office. But he has talked about unity. What I'll be listening for, David, is will this speech be about unity or division? Will it be about grace or grievance? Will it be about civility or discord? When we've seen messages, you know, both. We've seen, you know, when he accepted the nomination of his party in last summer, it was both about, as Lindsey Davis said so eloquently that night, he went from grace to grievance pretty quickly. So I'll be very interested in hearing what the overture of this next administration sounds like. These are the opening notes and the speech that Donald Trump will provide them.
You're seeing right there, thank you, Mark, and Mark will be with us all day here. Marine One sitting there, though it won't be called Marine One at that point. That will carry President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden away from the Capitol. Really a short time from now, this all begins to move fairly quickly. President Biden enjoying his final hours in the Oval Office, that sort of last desk time, if you will. And that Marine One, Ronald Reagan used that to leave when he passed the reins, if you will, to his vice president, George Herbert Walker Bush. And Nancy Reagan famously shared with the American people years later that when they took off, first of that moment when Ronald Reagan turned around and saluted, and she said, you know, you could feel it in your throat when you watched that. People were quite emotional, Nancy Reagan said. But then she said they flew up, and he said, Nancy, look, there's our little bungalow, as they were flying around the White House and did a loop around. And so began the tradition of sort of flying one last time around the White House. It's regardless of how you feel about an outgoing president, whether you supported them or not, it's always a deeply moving moment to watch them actually leaving the Capitol. You're seeing the motorcade with dignitaries beginning to arrive here at the Capitol. And you give up a lot by going inside, but it also becomes a very intimate passing of the torch, if you will, John.
Yeah, and can you imagine being the person that had to cull down the invite list? There's about 800 people that can fit inside that rotunda. About half of what could have fit on the west front of the Capitol. But it's going to be an astounding collection of people. Obviously, you have the past presidents, Clinton and Obama and Bush. Obviously, Joe Biden and the First Lady will be there. But also, you got several foreign leaders, including the Vice President of China on hand. And I think most remarkably are the big tech leaders in this country. Elon Musk, of course, there, but also Tim Cook of Apple. Also, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. The three richest Americans are there honoring Donald Trump.
This is the east front of the Capitol. You're seeing Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner. They were advisors 8 years ago. They went to the White House with Ivanka's father. They will not do that this time, but perhaps they will advise, but from afar and outside the White House. Ivanka Trump has said she loves her father, she loved the time in the White House, but that she hates politics, was the quote, I believe, or something very close to that. Watching them enter there, the rotunda, we saw Eric Trump and his family moments ago. Whit Johnson, you're right outside there. What do you see?
Yeah, David, those images you're seeing just about 20 feet to my right here. We've seen the Trump family walk by. We saw Eric Trump, Lara Trump, their children walk by. You mentioned Ivanka. Jared Kushner walked by as well. And we also, of course, saw Barron Trump, who was just a little boy the last time he was in the White House. Now he's easy to pick out, stands above the crowd. More walking up here as the motorcade comes in. We also saw, pretty interesting, a short time ago, former Vice President Mike Pence arrived here at the Capitol. As we should point out, 4 years ago, it was not Trump who was here for Joe Biden's inauguration. Instead, it was Mike Pence who attended with his wife, Karen, and took part in those ceremonies. This will be the location of a number of remarkable and historic moments today on the east front. Right over my left shoulder, that's the Senate carriage entrance. So we saw this motorcade come through, a bunch of arrivals here, but that presidential motorcade will arrive right here as well. That will have the incoming president and outgoing president in the same limousine. You'll also have the vice presidents and first ladies. They will go inside for the ceremonies. And then, David, you were talking about that moment, that exit, that departure at the end. Joe Biden and Donald Trump will come out here on the east front of the Capitol. We've been looking at Marine One, which landed just a short time ago. That is where Trump will say goodbye to Joe Biden, and that will be quite a sight when the Bidens leave in that helicopter after more than half a century of public service here in Washington.
The
David.
final chapter politically for Joe Biden and for Jill Biden leaving Washington. Whit Johnson, just shout if you see something interesting. We'll come right back to you. Thank you for that. You know, we had a bit of a test run, if you will, last week with Jimmy Carter's funeral and that beautiful service at the National Cathedral where we saw Mike Pence interact with Donald Trump really for the first time publicly. They shook hands. It was a brief moment, but appeared to be somewhat warm, somewhat cordial. But what a difference from 4 years ago when it was only Mike Pence who showed up for the inauguration of Joe Biden after what the nation and the world saw transpire on January 6th. I want to bring in Governor Chris Christie, who's with us here this morning as well. Governor Christie, famously a part of that transition planning 8 years ago. Not this time, but Governor Christie, you know, we were talking about how different it is this time around. And one of the things that you said that really struck a chord, for me anyway, was that Donald Trump certainly does not seem afraid to be president this time around. He knows the role, he knows the job.
No doubt about that. You know, 8 years ago, David, Donald Trump was nervous about being president of the United States. And it was a very tumultuous transition, kind of a back of the envelope attempt in the last month and a half or so by folks like Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner to throw something together and throw away the work that the transition team had done over the 7 or 8 months before he was entering office. And I think it showed in the first, couple of weeks of the administration in 2017 and how things were kind of disjointed and did not go as Donald Trump would have wanted them to go. Today, this is much, much different. This is, first of all, a man who's been president, prepared to be president, and knows what he wants to do. He's also surrounded by a group of people that he knows much better than the group of people he knew 8 years ago. And these are people who only had to pass one test to get the job. And that was loyalty to Donald Trump as he defines loyalty, which is to do what he asks you to do, when he asks you to do it, and how he asks you to do it. He is now surrounded by that group of people. That probably makes him more comfortable today as well. And how that will then lead to execution, I think you're going to see very potentially a successful out of the gate move by Donald Trump. The executive actions that they're taking, I think, will be consistent with what he talked about during the campaign. Some will be controversial, but that's part of his style. But in the end, I think you could see some real success in the early weeks of this administration because the planning was taken seriously this time by Donald Trump. You know, he famously used to give me a hard time, David, when I was planning the transition for him during the campaign. He hated it. He hated that there was planning going on for the transition. He was superstitious. And one time he said to me, you know, Chris, you and I are so smart that if we left the victory party 2 hours early, we could do the entire transition. It was a misunderstanding by him back then about what he was coming into. He has no such misunderstanding now, David. And I think that augurs well for the country in these first few weeks of the administration, that he is both personally better prepared and that his team is better prepared than it was 8 years ago, because he's permitted them to be better prepared.
Yeah, really fascinating insight there. Governor Christie hasn't always seen eye to eye with Donald Trump. Donald Trump hasn't seen eye to eye with Governor Christie as well. They've been public about that. But the governor saying this time around could be, in fact, very different because Donald Trump knows the job. He has a team around him that he trusts. It is about loyalty. And Governor Christie predicting that this could be a successful start in many ways to the second Trump administration. And Governor Christie has said that it's not on policy that he disagrees with Trump. He's with him 75% of the time, I believe Christie has said. Governor Christie will be with us throughout the day here as well. Thank you, Chris. As we go back to the images of the arrivals here, I want to bring in John Santucci, who has covered the Trump family for ABC for quite some time. John, we saw Eric Trump and his family arrive, Ivanka and Jared arrive. Again, the family arrives, their return to Washington, but very different roles this time around.
Yeah, no member of the Trump family moving into the White House outside of Melania and maybe Barron when he's visiting from NYU this time, David. It really is interesting because think about it. For Donald Trump, most of his life, he has had a member of the family near him. You know, in Trump Tower, the offices go all the way up to the 26th floor. The 25th floor was often referred to as the kids' floor. They were right below Donald Trump, and he would quickly summon one of them up for any advice, guidance, hop on a call with him. And that's how things were, David, 8 years ago in the White House. He would, you know, knock on the door next to the presidential dining room off the Oval, and Jared Kushner was right there because that was his office. And right above the Oval Office 8 years ago was Ivanka Trump's office, a senior advisor. So this is a very different time, given that they have made it very clear, Javanka, as they were referred to when they came to Washington, are not coming back this time around. But I do think a presence, David, that we're going to see more.
Hello, everyone. We are a bit early for this election cycle, but just gonna go live at 10:30. It's almost 10 o'clock now, so we're a little early, but too awfully worried.
Is mother.
So,
we'll see how often she is around DC, but
anyway,
she supports her father. But I also am keeping my eye on
this is the motorcade.
said that it was Barron that opened his eyes to a new media this time around, being podcasters. We know the president-elect did many interviews speaking to different podcasters.
Yes, Joe Rogan. He did Joe Rogan.
To the November election and credited Barron. And listen, Donald Trump, we all know, is his own best communications advisor, says he knows media better than anybody. I think it was remarkable to think his youngest child exposed Donald Trump to a new form of media, David.
Well, that would sort of make sense.
Melania Trump, as you have suggested before, has been very protective
This audio is going to be super low on purpose so I don't get copyright struck.
His endorsement, nearly as important as Donald Trump, not as important as his father, but very important behind the scenes to get the support of Don Jr. They're now arriving at the White House, and this is the moment every 4 years. And again, I mentioned it didn't happen 4 years ago. Donald Trump did not invite the Bidens to the White House. He left at about 8 a.m., actually, left Washington. But here they arrive.
Oh yeah, so
Trump had said after that meeting in the Oval Office, 2 hours with President Biden a couple weeks back, that he thought this was important too, that the returning president thought that this exchange, this moment with the outgoing president is an important one. Let's watch.
not apparently important originally. Peaceful transfer of power, ladies and gentlemen. I don't get his other hand, like when he shakes hands and puts the other one on their elbow. I don't understand that exactly, but it's cold. Here it's like 0 or 1 degree Fahrenheit. I don't know what it's like in Washington D.C. 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 I don't know who's yelling right now. It's 4 degrees right now. Sorry, it's going to be 0. The low is going to be 0 for the next 3 nights in a row. That would make sense. Washington, D.C. is 25, so it's warmer. Good morning, will Fauci have to worry about his attempts on his life? He got a pardon by President Biden, but I'm not sure about the attempts. I haven't heard of any myself. Maybe somebody like walked by him and like said, "I have COVID," at you, and like sneezed in his general direction. I have no idea, honestly, but he was one guy that handled things poorly, and also he was kind of... Well, you've met a lot of people who claim to know about... I'm going to mute this for a second. I'm sure you've met a lot of people who claim to know what they're talking about on something that's literally brand new that you don't know anything about. That's kind of what he's like. Like, people have general ideas like, oh, we know how to treat COVID, blah, blah, blah. When it's like, listen, this is brand new. Nobody knows what this is or how it really works, so maybe it won't react to all of the things that other viruses react to, so maybe you're wrong. But I think his sense of, oh, I know, sort of made him the object of ridicule. And again, not sure about the attempts, but I haven't heard of any myself. But then again, it probably wouldn't make front page news, or maybe it would. I'm not sure. But hopefully he doesn't have to worry about it. I'm going to be in and out. I'm going to be going to watch... we have this up on my big TV in the other room, and my mother's watching it currently. So I'm going to be sort of in and out, but then like once we get to the actual like speech and stuff, then I will come back and watch this live. But for now, I'm gonna sit here and just listen to what they're saying, and and talk to you, the audience, of course. Mm. Do you see that one guy over there whose hat is like this guy right here whose hat is like woo? I don't think your hat's supposed to look like that. I wonder if anybody else has pointed that out.
Because he just left her in the dust and kind of ran up and spoke to Barack Obama. She was holding a Tiffany box with a silver-plated picture frame to give to Michelle Obama, and it was super awkward because everything is choreographed and who was going to hold it for the picture, and there was only one gift. So the awkwardness this time is not there, right? This is the second time around. What's really striking to me, having worked overseas as a foreign correspondent, is in other countries, rivals from different parties, this just doesn't happen, right? I mean, sometimes they get thrown in jail by the new guys. Sometimes they're just erased. The idea that they're sharing those steps in the White House is being watched literally all around the world.
Oh, you don't have anything? Alex Alberto G don't have a response? Okay, come and ask a question and not respond. It seems kind of...
democracy here in the U.S. So we'll revisit that image right after the break, and also any reporting from what's playing out inside the White House, of course, to be the fly on the wall there with the Bidens and the Trumps today. We'll be right back after this short break with what we learn about the conversation playing out inside the White House. Of course, Kamala Harris there as well with incoming Vice President J.D. Vance. We're back.
All right. Perfect. All right, well, we'll be back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to go sit down with my mum, and I'll be back.
inauguration was
Hello.
given. Now, we do also know that last week, Doug Emhoff did reach out by phone to Usha Vance to talk perhaps about some of the logistics just of moving in. But Kamala Harris, it seems, was not quite ready to have that conversation with J.D. Vance.
Of course she wasn't.
Today, which is also interesting, of course, given the importance that President Biden has put on the participation in this day.
Well, that's the first, right? A conversation between a second gentleman and an incoming second lady. That's never happened before,
That certainly
right?
has not. And having to, of course, you forget that part of today is also just moving day. There's a lot of logistics that go into this day, too. It is
Cleaning as well, so that's part of what I'm doing.
test that moving is absolutely one of the worst things, no matter whether you are a president or vice president or just an average American. So they have to just navigate how to get in and out. But it is actually something that even we know Melania Trump feels a little bit better around this go around. She has said she already knows where the furniture is going to go. She's got everything picked out, everything smoother the second time around.
It's so interesting when you talk about moving day. When you read back of all these transitions, it's also fascinating. You had Laura Bush, I think, in some of her memoirs, she wrote about arriving after the 8 years of Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton as First Lady, that when they arrived there, the Clintons wanted to enjoy that final night in the White House with Chelsea and some of the traditions, the theater inside the White House, and that Bill Clinton literally ran out of time. He just started dumping his clothes, inside the suitcases. And Laura Bush talked about how during the inauguration they glanced over during one of these exchanges, and Bill Clinton had nodded off because he stayed up with Chelsea and the family to try to enjoy those final hours. All of these families they become close to the teams inside the White House. George W. Bush assembled the White House staff before they left, and he and Laura thanked them and said, I think in so many words, George Bush said to them, I won't miss much about Washington, but I will miss all of you. And I think that speaks volumes. We've all been invited to the White House before for these interviews, sometimes for the White House lunch, and you're always moved. The Joint Chiefs are now arriving, always moved by the dedication of the staff that serves incoming presidents and first ladies and their families, whether they're Republican or Democrat, inside the White House.
Wow.
As we look at the arrivals inside the rotunda, a lot has been made about the guest list. It's going to be pared down a bit, but still on that guest list, Lindsay Davis, are these sort of tech titans, and you learned that they were actually part of the service this morning. They went and attended the service?
They were inside St. John's Church, part of the
St. John's. I said something else.
That made it in. $885 billion of combined wealth when you're talking about. Now, John said they were the richest 3 Americans. According to Forbes, they're actually the richest 3 people in the world. And when you talk about that combined $885 billion worth of wealth, that's more wealth than all but 19 countries' GDP. And what's really stunning about it is the about face that if you talk about in particular Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, there are 3 people who initially in 2016 all rebuffed Donald Trump. You'll remember Jeff Bezos said that he felt that Donald Trump would erode American democracy. This time around, he actually donated $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund. Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook founder, of course, many people are going to remember in the days after January 6th, he actually removed Donald Trump's Facebook account from Facebook. He's said to be co-hosting a black tie reception tonight. And in the last week, when Biden gave that farewell speech, of course, he gave that really stark warning when he said, quote, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy. And just to take a quick comparison, Joe Biden's cabinet net worth $118 million. Trump's cabinet, it's expected to be the wealthiest in history, worth at least $7 billion. He has assembled the wealthiest presidential administration in modern history. 13 billionaires set to take on a government post.
Yeah, really interesting, Terry Moran, because the inaugural speech 8 years ago and the campaign really that won Donald Trump the White House against Hillary Clinton. She won the popular vote. He won the Electoral College. But he won on that message of the forgotten man and the forgotten woman. And you have all these billionaires now coming. And a lot of folks will say there's nothing wrong with that. America should be aspirational. But the question is whether or not Donald Trump is going to be able to bring down those grocery prices so that Americans who do who weren't convinced that Kamala Harris, when she was the top of the ticket, was going to be able to solve some of the inflationary pain that they have felt for years here. The question is, when you put tech billionaires in the front row and it's aspirational, what the policies will do. And that'll be the big question for all of us reporters watching in these next couple of years here, is whether or not the American families who really do deserve from whoever they elect answers to the sort of inflationary pain that they have felt, whether or not they will reap the rewards, if you will, of any of these policies now coming.
That is the question. Will the American people, the forgotten men and women, will they be the beneficiary of this administration? Will this administration walk the walk? And look who gets the seats inside in the warm rotunda. I think one of the things that we miss with it not being outside is that this election in particular strikes me as not just the triumph of a man, although Donald Trump is the dominant political figure of our time, but of a political movement that actually predates him.
Accompanied by the Honorable Elaine Chao.
Yeah.
Former Republican leader Mitch McConnell entering. Obviously, John Thune now heads the Republicans in the Senate. And Terry, we'll get back to that thought in a moment, but John Carl, no love lost between Mitch McConnell and the 47th President Donald Trump and his return.
Look, Donald Trump relied on Mitch McConnell to get through much of his agenda for the first Trump presidency, including those 3 Supreme Court justices confirmed in large part because of the work that Mitch McConnell did. But yes, no love lost.
Mitch McConnell was probably around for
He talked about responsibility being Donald Trump's after January 6th, then defended him against impeachment. And Martha Raddatz, we're also seeing military leaders gather there, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Is essentially
The Joint Chiefs now, C.Q. Brown. And C.Q. Brown has to be a little nervous sitting there because Pete Hegseth, who is the nominee for the defense secretary, has said some rather disparaging things about him. That they want to review all of the generals, all of the general officers, to see whether they...
Audio volume is very unbalanced. Yes, and I'll tell you why. If I do this...
C.Q. Brown was sitting there alone when we took the shot of him moments ago, but I'm sure the rest
then,
of sort of the group of military leaders who will
can't
be
hear
assembled
myself
in that room
speak.
will be gathered
2,
there with him. Again, you mentioned
ABC will
Hegseth, the
copyright claim my
hearing.
stream,
Many,
and
tough
then when I
questions
want to
asked
go
by
watch this
Democrats.
later, won't
Joni
be
Ernst,
able
a
to.
Republican senator from Iowa, obviously on her, but she signaled afterwards
So,
that she will support him. It looks like
sorry,
Hegseth has a very good
but
chance of becoming the head of the country.
protecting myself. I'll turn up a little bit more.
He is very young. He does not have
Here, I'll do this.
management experience. He is, of course, a combat veteran, but they brought up his past. They brought up charges and accusations that he drank
Here, we'll
too
do
much,
this.
which he basically said was anonymous smearing. He has also supported people who have been accused and convicted of war crimes. He was questioned about
Here, I'll
that,
do
but
this.
it
Is this
looks
a
at
little
this
bit better?
point that Pete Hegseth will be confirmed as defense secretary. Another thing I'm thinking about, David, as we watch
My mom says that he knows this guy right here,
is that if you ask Donald Trump
next to the
today-
lady in the white
today
coat on the
whether
left.
he won the 2020 race, he would still say he did. He still
Also, let me
believes
clean the
that
camera a
there
little
was
bit.
A problem with the election, and that he is indeed the winner. And still,
Winter?
you
He's
have
indeed the winter.
Joe Biden
Cold weather must be on their mind.
welcoming back to the White House.
Jeff Bezos and his wife arriving there at the Rotunda, Martha. We were
Oh yeah,
talking
there he
with
is.
Lindsay a moment ago about
I can
Mark
see the
Zuckerberg,
light
Elon Musk, Bezos, Apple's,
reflecting off his
Tim
bald head.
Cook will be there as well. You can see
What was
Mark
that lady
Zuckerberg
walking
there,
by?
as well, entering, and the combined wealth that many of these tech titans had strong words against Donald Trump 8 years ago, and now have not only embraced him, but have donated money to the
What's going
inauguration
on here?
and are now front and center at the inauguration.
Another
And
motorcade.
Rebecca Jarvis, our chief economics and business correspondent, again.
For who, I
Americans
wonder?
are smart. We've got a lot of cynical viewers too watching today. A lot of supporters who say it's time to really embrace technology, obviously, and America needs to be the leader in technology. But on the other hand, also asking, do they really believe in all the policies of Trump, or do they recognize he's the guy in power now? And if we want to steamroll ahead with fewer guardrails, perhaps, than what we were facing under a Democratic administration, is that driving
Yo.
sort of why they've been so supportive.
It's
to her.
Hillary
Real quick, Rebecca,
Clinton.
let me just mention here that former President Bill Clinton, former First Lady Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, obviously she made history as the first woman nominee of a major party for president. She lost to Donald Trump, and you talk about these difficult moments, Kamala Harris facing Donald Trump after losing to him, but it was Hillary Clinton who the nation watched in 2017, having won the popular vote by nearly 3 million votes, but having lost the Electoral College by 76,000 votes or so across 3 states. She talked about the pain of that day, but felt she was duty-bound to show up as a former First Lady, and she is back there today with Bill Clinton. But Rebecca,
What do you
back
think?
to that question
Nice
about Mark
glasses.
Zuckerberg, Elon
Let me
Musk,
know.
Jeff Bezos.
Should probably
what's
wear
driving
them
this?
more.
Why have they been so supportive? And now
They're
they've
supposed to let me see if I'm farther away from the screen.
Well, David, you raised the point. It is an interesting fact to see.
It's hard to watch them and have headphones on at the same time.
Said things about Donald Trump
She must be on TikTok.
that were not
Be the lady that's like doing
they're
this.
making large donations. They're present at the inauguration. Some of them were present even at the very intimate church service. Not only are these individuals
The
who have
intimate
said
church
things in the
service,
past
you
about
say.
Donald Trump, but they've said things about each other in the past. You've had Bezos and Musk, not necessarily sworn enemies, but going head to head in the space race. You've had Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, head to head in social media. And now this group of individuals in the last handful of weeks leading up to this inauguration has been doing things like patting each other on the back, whether it's on social media or in major addresses for their companies. You're seeing a lot of that. It is potentially going to be a challenge going forward to both hold those interests as well as hold interests for the American people that the voters who put Donald Trump into office are particularly conscientious of. Their wallet, their paycheck, seeing less of that going towards goods and services, seeing prices coming down. Donald Trump has a giant agenda, the 200 executive actions.
Going to be an interesting 4 years. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Things like tariffs, immigration, the energy policy in this country.
Good or bad? I don't know. Interesting,
For the
definitely.
early days of this presidency, because as we've heard in the past from people like Elon Musk, who is now running Doge, which is meant to reduce
Doge.
spending,
I'm still laughing at that.
there could be near-term pain as a result of that. You
Oh,
can't
look, there's her.
necessarily shut down $2 trillion
There were like 3 women on
spending in this
screen.
economy and expect it to continue to grow
4.
as it currently is growing with 4.1% unemployment. At the same time, people are looking at those prices, that inflation, David, which is still up almost 3% from a year ago, even though prices, or rather inflation has come down dramatically.
Excuse me.
People want to see those prices go lower, and that has to be a focus of this president.
I think a
if
lot
the
of American
who put
people
him
are
in
already
office
tired of this.
are going to get what they want.
Just me.
Well said, Rebecca. Really a smart point there. And it's not something that you're alone in saying. Donald Trump has said it himself. In interviews after the election, he has acknowledged one of the main reasons he believes he won against Kamala Harris are grocery prices. He recognizes that. I'm sure his campaign saw that in the polling leading up to the election. Certainly, Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign saw that in the polling, which is why you saw her talk repeatedly about grocery prices, some of her plans. She didn't win the election based on those policies, but obviously focus groups were telling both campaigns that people have felt this inflation and they want a leader who's going to do something. And now the pressure really will be on, as you say, Rebecca, on Donald Trump and his administration, particularly when you see, and we just saw Vivek Ramaswamy, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos arriving, these tech titans and these billionaires who've been very successful, and certainly no one is punishing them for that. This is one of the great things about America. The question is whether or not any of that opportunity and that sort of economic growth will be felt by the working class families who really have been feeling the pain these last couple of years and are expecting that with this change will come change for them as well. We're watching some of the arrivals. Jim
Hopefully I'll be back when it gets started.
You'll remember he played such a pivotal role.
All right,
really
see you later.
president in the first place.
Things start at about noon, so be back before then, like a few minutes before.
But it was that endorsement endorsement from Jim Clyburn that sent a powerful message to the party and resuscitated his campaign and put Joe Biden on the path to winning the presidency. It is just remarkable to see everyone in the same room there, really considering the divisions, deep divisions still in the Capitol. But it does strike me what a difference from 4 years ago. It does appear.
Rudy Giuliani.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, you could think back to when Donald Trump first came to office, and Washington really wasn't quite sure what they were in for, what was coming next. Republicans weren't quite sure how they were going to work with the incoming Trump administration. There was a lot of pushback. I covered the Hill at the time, and there was a lot of concern, and it appears we see some action at the White House here.
They are now emerging from the White House, and as we look at these pictures here, there's the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, and Usha Vance, who will be the second lady. They're getting into the motorcade now. They'll travel together. It appears they're going to travel together. There were questions about whether or not they would. The first 4 cars will carry
But that guy must be cold.
important people, if you will, those who are going to have the most power, certainly, in the country moving forward. The incoming vice president, the incoming president, obviously Donald Trump, will be in the car with Joe Biden.
Just move this.
Principle 8, they call them. And this right here is the symbol of a peaceful transfer of power. This trip up to the Capitol now from the White House after the tea. So again, we watched Doug Emhoff and Usha Vance emerge, but none of the other principals as of yet, and we will go right back to that the moment we do, because these images are really sort of fascinating. And as we stay on these images here inside the Capitol Rotunda, let's stay in this live moment here, but I want to bring Rachel Scott into the conversation, our senior political correspondent, Rachel. And when you look in this room, you've seen Republican leaders gathering in this room as well. And certainly this Republican Party knows it is also very different from 2017. It is now 2024. Many Republicans have been elected in this Donald Trump era, and he arrives now with a lot more power than what he arrived with in 2017. They recognize this. They recognize he is. He was the leader of their party in 2017 as well, but they tested him in a way that they won't be able to this time, because the voters sent him with both the popular vote and the Electoral College, and he helped a lot of these people get elected in the House and the Senate.
Huh.
And David, this is a Republican Party that is strengthened and now emboldened by President-elect Donald Trump being at the White House. President-elect Trump is going to take the oath of office, and he's going to go to the White House with majority in both chambers of Congress. And Republicans really do feel a sense of responsibility. Even the President-elect told me over the weekend to deliver on the promises that he made during the campaign trail. There have already been intense discussions underway on that big piece of legislation, or possibly 2 big pieces of legislation that could range from everything from the border to energy, that the president-elect wants his party to get done by April. Speaker Mike Johnson says that he hopes that the House can pass that bill by April. And in many ways, again, also you have Senate Republicans right now who are inside of the Capitol, and they are also considering.
There's someone with an eye patch on in there.
The president-elect told me that he wants them to get across the finish line as quickly as possible, and even some of the most controversial picks. We talked about Pete Hegseth a little bit earlier as well. It appears Republicans are falling in line, and it seems like there is broad consensus around Donald Trump, the president-elect's cabinet picks this time around.
Rachel Scott with
Sake. Hold on. Give me a second. I'm having some copyright issues. This is what I thought. Immediately what I thought. Okay, hold on. Live stream copyright notice. Your stream was interrupted. Can you tell me after copyright material is no longer being streamed, streams are automatically re-enabled? Yeah, my stream's no longer being blocked. So there's a lot going on here. Okay. Here's what we're gonna do. Turn it down.
Big look at this country, and you can probably hear right now there are vigorous forces out here, kind of a town square.
We'll turn it down a bit.
People kind of coming at this from different angles, and to your point, yes, this is falling on Martin Luther King Day, and I happened to speak to his daughter, Dr. Bernice King, a couple of days ago about this, and she said that she was quite excited in a way that this is falling on her Father's Day, this inauguration, because it will encourage people to lean into looking at Martin Luther King, thinking about him, thinking about his teachings. And of course, when you hear the difference of opinions out here, that's exactly what she is talking about. But she cautions us, particularly those who may not be as excited about this day, and there are plenty out here who are, but for those who may be feeling despair and disappointment, she says that this is a reminder that her father was all about change and working toward change. And that, interestingly, is what happened when her mother was so bitterly disappointed when Jimmy Carter lost his election to Ronald Reagan. But then she continued to work and continued to push. And then it was Ronald Reagan who actually signed this holiday into law. So when you hear the competing factions out here like you do today, people coming at this from all angles, you are reminded that that's kind of what Martin Luther King was actually talking about people sort of airing their differences but coming together. And Bernice King says that this is a time to do this on this day, Martin Luther King Day. David.
Deborah Roberts and our conversation with Bernice King. Thank you, Deb. We're watching First Lady Jill Biden now leave to get into the motorcade. The incoming First Lady, Melania Trump, will join Jill Biden on that ride to the Capitol. 8 years ago, Melania Trump joining Michelle Obama in a motorcade to the Capitol. They talked about their children, among other things, on the route to the Capitol. Michelle Obama will not be there this year, Lindsay.
You know, it's
Yeah, she's not coming this time.
Obviously, she's not the first.
Big Mike isn't going to be there.
At least in modern day history, Melania Trump and Donald Trump, who decided to serve as the first in modern era to not attend, for a sitting president to not attend their successor's inauguration. But Michelle Obama talked about this on a podcast not too long ago when she talked about attending
Here, we'll do that. How about that?
the first time around in 2016. She said to sit on that stage and watch the opposite of what we represented on display. There was no diversity. There was no color on that stage. There was no reflection of the broader sense of America.
How about this? There we go.
Interesting to see if Karen
It's now
is in attendance. Of course, we saw
opaque,
there was kind of some
which means you can't see some stuff.
She did not acknowledge Donald Trump when he and Melania entered the church for Jimmy Carter's funeral. So a few no-shows of import potentially today.
And we took note that Michelle Obama didn't attend Jimmy Carter's. There's Susie Wiles, the incoming chief of staff in the White House, the first woman to hold that role. Much has been made about her relationship.
Audio
with Donald
filters.
Trump, considered sort of a brother-sister type relationship. They defend one another. They work in private. And you know, for all that Donald Trump has said in the past about chiefs of staff and others who have held similarly important roles in the West Wing, he's been deeply critical of them. You don't hear him say a critical word about Susie Wiles. So John Santucci, what is it? What is the secret sauce here? What is it about Susie Wiles that has made her so darn effective at working with Donald Trump and for the most part keeping him, you know, focused on the issue at hand? As we
Okay,
now are.
this should be fine. She does not look happy.
Watching Vice President Kamala Harris leave the White House. Very well, thank you. The incoming Vice President, J.D. Vance, gets this. He said, great, thank you. Kamala Harris said, very well, thank you. I gather they were asked, how did it go? How's the morning going? How are you?
She probably went inside, sat down, and was like, listen, J.D. Vance, I was born in a middle-class household. And he's like, don't care. You lost. Get out. Don't care. And she's like,
That's quite something, because it's not simply
you know.
vice president.
All right, I'm taking these off.
She's very close to making history herself. mandate
weird.
in the Electoral College. But when you look at the numbers, John Carl, you know, we're no strangers to very
We'll be
close elections.
back in a second.
48-49 election, very close race.
It was an incredibly close election. It broke Donald Trump's way. He won all of those 7 battleground states.
There we
but
go,
David,
get that.
only one of them was very close. And it was very close nationally. There was a question about executive orders. But look, that car ride, which is a tradition that goes
Here.
back to the goes back to the 19th century, is really something else. Of course, it didn't always used to be an automobile. It goes back to the days of horse and buggy. And it's been really tense at times. This one, that one you're seeing right there with the incoming and outgoing vice president, I'm sure is going to be a very tense ride. But between Biden and Trump, both of whom have exchanged accusations of being worthy of criminal prosecution. Trump actually prosecuted by the Justice Department under Joe Biden. If you look back in history, you see there's a famous photo of FDR riding in a convertible with Herbert Hoover in 1933, and they're sharing a blanket because it was very cold, like it is today.
All right.
And that ride may have been the chilliest till we get to where we are today.
I wonder if the vice presidential ride will be chillier than once you get Joe Biden and Donald Trump in that car. They seem to have shown that they are convinced the optics of this are what are really necessary.
I'll be back.
For the American people, at least this time around. As Lindsay just pointed out a moment ago, it was the Trumps in these modern times who first sort of decided that they did not want to partake. They left at 8 a.m. 4 years ago. It still was Air Force One when he left because he was still president. And he said as he was leaving Andrews that we'll be back in some shape or form, and now he's back as the 47th president. But to watch Joe Biden say, "Welcome home" at the White House, Mary, with a smile, and to welcome him to the Oval Office a few weeks back, for them to meet for 2 hours and have Donald Trump ask Joe Biden, what's most concerning to you as you look around at all the world's hot spots? He was genuinely interested in what Joe Biden thought as well. Behind the scenes, and even Donald Trump acknowledged on that day, politics, and in so many words, is really ugly. But today's a beautiful day, is what he said in the Oval Office with Joe Biden that day.
It is remarkable when you contrast what we are seeing today to the divisiveness that we saw in the campaign, especially when Joe Biden was still running. I mean, they both argued that the other one was essentially unfit to serve. And yet here they are coming together for the sake of democracy to show this peaceful transfer of power. And David, you mentioned 4 years ago, I keep thinking back, I was standing there on the west front of the Capitol. Donald Trump, of course, was not going to participate. He had refused to admit that he had lost. He was leaving Washington in disgrace. He had been shunned by his own party after the attack on the Capitol, which was just days before that. He was facing a second impeachment. And yet, as I stood there, I looked up and I saw Marine One, which was leaving. Donald Trump leaving Washington, and yet he was circling the Capitol, as if he couldn't help himself but to get one last look at what was going on. And now here he is. As you mentioned, when he left at the time, he had said he would be back in some form. He actually departed there from Andrews to the sound of Sinatra's song, "I Did It My Way," playing. And he has done it his way. And doing it his way has now led to this really remarkable comeback, though he doesn't want to call it that.
Which takes us right to the moment here. Both leaders emerging from the White House. Senator Klobuchar, who was running the inaugural committee. But all eyes on these two presidents. So guys, I think we figured it out. It'll be Amy Klobuchar who can give us the inside scoop from inside that car, the readout. But there you have it, Donald Trump, Joe Biden in the motorcade as they make that trip up Pennsylvania Avenue to the Capitol. Something we did not see 4 years ago, but again, both, Martha, were convinced that this is something the country needed to see today.
And it is something the country needs to see because the country is so divided. Seeing these two presidents, former president, future president, present president, is important to the nation. Look, there are people out there who voted for Donald Trump who don't particularly like Donald Trump, but they like his policies. They like what he promised. They like the changes he wanted to make. So he had their support. So going into this day, despite the history, despite what Donald Trump still believes, that he lost that election in 2020, they were able to come together and make this historic ride back in the beast, as that limousine is called, the historic beast. Donald Trump looked very happy getting inside that. Joe Biden, of course, I noticed he touched the hand of the agent before. It was probably, as we said before, saying goodbye to staff. It's the same staff over and over. They serve presidents, but they make a very, very strong bond.
Mary Jordan, to be in that car.
You know, not always do they have a third person. It's very interesting that Amy Klobuchar is there. The last time in 2017, Roy Blunt, senator from Missouri, was in the car, but that was because of the strain between. Then it was Obama and Trump. Now it is clearly a strained relationship. So it's very interesting that Amy is there. But Donald Trump has a high threshold for awkwardness, right? I mean, Marco Rubio, called him a con artist, and he called Rubio a lowlife, and now he's his nominee to be the Secretary of State. So we have seen over and over again that Donald Trump doesn't seem to mind the most awkward situations. Melania Trump is his third wife. His second wife is here in Washington. She's been posting pictures. Marla Maples, the mother of Tiffany. People don't even like to go to Thanksgiving dinner with kind of awkward family members. This guy can do it in front of a couple billion people that are watching around the world today.
Mary, I think that's such a great point. I mean, that is why we are seeing today so many families in this country, and perhaps you have it in yours, where a Thanksgiving dinner or a family reunion or a gathering where you have a politically divided belief system, even within your own family or your own friends, that if Donald Trump and Joe Biden can get in the car and ride to the Capitol. I will say about Donald Trump, he does seem to be very well equipped at understanding political theater, understanding the game that's involved in politics and how cutthroat it can be. He alluded to that, Mary, in that Oval Office meeting when he said, boy, this can be really rough stuff. But today, it's a beautiful thing. And this moment right here is also something that, quite frankly, the people who show up, who vote, who take part in democracy, even if they think differently from their neighbors, but and put out their signs, and yet they still go, they vote. They believe in the system, and they deserve to see this today.
And to your point, if they can sit together in the car, albeit with Amy Klobuchar as a bit of a buffer, perhaps there's hope for everyone's divided families at the Thanksgiving table. It is remarkable. And yes, Donald Trump, no one does political stagecraft better. And even though, of course, you aren't seeing perhaps as large of crowds outside as he would have hoped, given the bitter cold out there, you certainly are still hearing many out there cheering. And he is going to find ways throughout the day to continue to have those indelible images, even though we won't see that traditional parade down Pennsylvania Avenue. I do have to mention, we did discuss earlier those pardons, those preemptive pardons that Joe Biden left a bit of a parting gift there as he was making his way out of office this morning, pardoning so many who he's concerned that will be targeted by Donald Trump. Anthony Fauci, General Milley, Liz Cheney. And you did see a bit of a grimace, I thought, on Donald Trump's face as he walked out of the White House just then. And we have seen reports that Donald Trump has now responded to another outlet about those pardons, calling them disgraceful, saying that many are guilty of major crimes. So it's clear that Donald Trump perhaps didn't particularly appreciate that last-minute move by President Biden, but Biden felt it was important to do, even though, of course, none of those officials have been convicted of any crimes, but the president wanting to proactively and preemptively protect them, given that Donald Trump has promised retribution.
Really interesting as we continue to watch this motorcade head up to the Capitol. If we could do a split screen, if that's possible, folks, in the control room, perhaps of just the emergence from the White House of Donald Trump and Joe Biden, just to see that facial expression from Donald Trump one more time. Because, John Carl, you noticed it too.
Yeah.
They did spend about 45 minutes there behind the scenes. I don't think Donald Trump drinks coffee or tea. On my interactions, it's always a Diet Coke or a Coke. But here they are emerging.
Well, I can report to you that when they spent 2 hours together in November, yeah, look at that. That does not look like a particularly warm walk out into the car. When they did spend their, by the way, I think as you see as Donald Trump gets into the car, you look through the window, it looks like he breaks out his cell phone, maybe to check his text messages, which is also something that's quite unusual. I see him looking, it seemed to me like he reached and he is, you know, looking at his phone. When they got together in November, they didn't drink coffee or tea, because as you said, Donald Trump doesn't drink coffee or tea. They didn't drink Diet Coke. There was no food served. I was told there was nothing but water for 2 hours. Yeah. But it was a warm meeting, according to my reporting on that. This, I don't think, will be as warm a ride. And I do believe that it's notable that Biden's pardons that are issued at this moment came just as we've learned that Trump is issuing an executive order essentially calling for an investigation into the investigators, including some of those who were pardoned.
That's right. So soon after this inauguration, we'll begin to see some of that executive action. Those orders take place. We'll dive into it all. You're not going to miss a thing here as they arrive here at the Capitol. We'll fit in a quick break, and we'll be right back with our live coverage of Donald Trump's inauguration in the Capitol. Joe Biden and Donald Trump in the motorcade now, on the way together, and we'll be right back.
ABC News live coverage of the second inauguration of Donald J. Trump returns in a moment.
You know something serious about to happen. I have an idea.
You guys have eyes on your targets.
Shouldn't we strategize?
Come on, we're gonna improvise. Freestyle.
No.
Joe Biden. That was Joe Biden right there, I believe, just disappearing behind the wall for a split second. Hard to actually see from this angle. And we were talking about their age, Martha. It's interesting, you know, Donald Trump is actually older than Joe Biden was when Joe Biden was elected to office 4 years ago. I think Joe Biden was 78 years old, 61 days. Donald Trump is 78 years old, 7 months, nearly 79 years old. The oldest ever to be elected to the office. There you see Joe Biden right there. We're about to see Donald Trump as well. But that says something.
That's a lot of age in the back of that beast. About 160 years combined with Joe Biden, now 82 years old. And when you think about the next 4 years, of course, Donald Trump would be 82 when he leaves office. We see him there. Age, of course, was an issue during this campaign, but much more with Joe Biden.
And Senator Amy Klobuchar, who, as I mentioned, is the chair of the inaugural committee, sort of leading the way. She actually rode in the motorcade, the two of them. You know, Donald Trump always looks serious at these moments, though, so I'm not sure it's necessarily reflective of their conversation, but look at the two of them. This is extraordinary. And you think about that first debate where Joe Biden had that performance and then had to bow out amid so much pressure. The two men who felt so strongly about the other in making the case to America that you can't go in that direction. Both of them said that about each other. Now to be walking into the Capitol together, Martha.
Walking into the Capitol after a tea that we hope was civil, and probably was civil because they both showed up. Of course, you have Elon Musk there, who has been such a huge, huge player in this transition. I've talked to people at the State Department. They said they're talking to people from Elon Musk's world as much as they are talking to those from Marco Rubio's world.
John Carl, do we have a real handle on the role Elon Musk is going to play? I mean, he really has been everywhere.
He's basically lived at Mar-a-Lago. In fact, he's had a space to stay overnight at Mar-a-Lago since right after the election. I am told there will be office space for this Department of Government Efficiency, which has no actual description in American law. It'll essentially be advising Donald Trump's Office of Management and Budget, but they will have office space, presumably including for Elon Musk, as he decides to use it in the Eisenhower Executive Office Building.
We saw J.D. Vance entering there as well with his wife, Usha Vance. And John, many have said that J.D. Vance's performance, particularly in his debate, might have been underestimated how much he helped Donald Trump also in making the case in those final weeks.
Look, it was a lopsided debate. He really performed very strongly. Walz, Kamala Harris's running mate, had by comparison, a very weak debate. Hard to say whether a VP debate ever moves the needle. Then we have Dana White, of course, a UFC head, somebody who is now on the board of Meta, very recently post-election, and a strong, longtime ally and friend of Donald Trump.
He actually said after Donald Trump won that night that nobody deserves this more than Donald Trump, is what he said on that stage. And what he was talking about was how much he believed that Donald Trump had been targeted. There you see Pete Hegseth entering, Pam Bondi. These are the picks for Donald Trump's cabinet. And so far, Donald Trump telling Rachel Scott, I'll bring you into the conversation here, Rachel. You talked with the incoming president over the weekend, and he said so far he likes what he's seeing with the confirmation process.
Exactly, David. I spoke to President-elect Donald Trump over the weekend. I asked him about his confirmation picks and his cabinet picks and how quickly he wants Republicans to move on them. He said that he was impressed by the confirmation hearings so far. He believed that all of them did a great job. All of those picks that you just saw walk in that room, we're seeing Kristi Noem there as well. They've been making the rounds here on Capitol Hill, meeting with Republicans, really, Kash Patel entering as well, really trying to get all Republicans on board ahead of their confirmation votes in the Senate. But President-elect Donald Trump says he wants them to move quickly and get this done and fill his cabinet.
Rachel, you see Tulsi Gabbard there at the end of the row. RFK Jr. obviously also we have awaited to see in sort of in that confirmation moment. But Tulsi Gabbard could face some tough questioning.
Tulsi Gabbard, absolutely, and she already has. I know from Republicans behind closed doors. You see Tulsi Gabbard standing right there. She's standing next to Chief of Staff Susie Wiles as well. Her confirmation hearing has yet to be scheduled, but we know that Democrats and some Republicans have had some tough questions to her about some of the past comments that she has made and whether or not she has promoted any Russia propaganda in the past as well. She could face a tough confirmation fight ahead. You see RFK Jr., as you mentioned, David, lining up there along.
Yes, I'm going to be confirmed. Yes.
Pam Bondi standing there as well. She just had her confirmation hearing on the Hill just last week. And then you see Kristi Noem. She was on Friday. Elise Stefanik. We're expecting her confirmation hearing to unfold in the next couple of days. You also saw Walz there as well. He just actually stepped down from his role as a member of Congress. And that's what's interesting, too, here, David, as all this is playing out. Donald Trump, the president-elect, he has plucked some members of the House straight out of the House and right into his cabinet, should they be confirmed or just in his administration in general. And that does leave House Republicans with a slimmer and slimmer majority. Speaker Mike Johnson even joked, please, please, please do not take anybody else.
Fully aware of the math, Speaker Johnson knows the margin will be very, very close, particularly given Donald Trump's choices. I want to bring Rachel Bade into the conversation as well. Rachel covers Congress for us. And Rachel, when you look at that array of cabinet picks, among them RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, where do you see any potential bumps ahead in the confirmation process? And are the rest expected to get through?
It's a great question, David, and I mean, particularly because when Trump was naming a lot of these folks to these cabinet positions, I was hearing a lot of anger from Republicans privately. A lot of them did not come out publicly, of course, to say that they don't want to be seen as, you know, lawmakers who are trying to be obstructionists to Donald Trump when it comes to picking these jobs. But, you know, they have fallen in line quite a bit, David. I mean, after Matt Gaetz, his initial pick for Attorney General went down, there was this sort of message that was sent to lawmakers up on Capitol Hill, specifically regarding Pete Hegseth, his pick for the Defense Department. A lot of Republicans didn't like him privately. They didn't want him to get this job. They didn't think he was qualified to run a massive agency like the Pentagon, that he didn't have enough experience. And yet, Donald Trump's allies, they rallied together and they made an example of these people who were expressing concerns about him. And since then, folks have gotten in line.
Rachel, we're looking at this picture of former Vice President Mike Pence walk in alone. And John Carl, this says it all. By himself. His wife is not with him, but showing up, you know, just as he did 4 years ago. He said because of his duty, and I would gather that's his explanation as to why he's showing up today.
Mike Pence is a patriot, and Mike Pence, on that day, January 6th, for the one and only time of his entire vice presidency, defied Donald Trump. Donald Trump wanted him to single-handedly overturn that election, but imagine that moment. Mike Pence's life was in danger on that day. The chance of the attackers of the Capitol saying, "Hang Mike Pence," whisked off the Senate floor. And David, you and I have gone back and looked at the video of just how close the rioters came to Mike Pence before he was taken in to down into the tunnels and to where he held up for several hours beneath the Capitol building, guarded by the Secret Service.
But this is sort of the new world order as far as American democracy right here, as you look at Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk. And Elon Musk, Mary Bruce, has made it very clear that if you don't, you know, get in line with what Donald Trump would like to do, and certainly these first 100 days, but get in line, period, that he's willing to use, you know, his money to go after you and to primary you if you are resistant in any way, certainly as a Republican, to Donald Trump's agenda.
His money and his megaphone, and both are very powerful, and he does plan to use them. He has made that incredibly clear. I think one big question, of course, is just what exactly is his role going to be in this administration? We've actually already seen some back and forth between those, you know, Trump's loyal supporters and advisors like Steve Bannon, who certainly doesn't appreciate Elon Musk's role here. But Elon Musk has also shown, even in recent weeks, the power that he can wield in Washington. I'm thinking back to that spending fight when Elon Musk single-handedly torpedoed those bipartisan negotiations and created a real headache for Speaker Mike Johnson. So I think anyone who thinks that these tech leaders are going to sort of be on the sidelines and be, you know, casual advisors may have another another thing coming. It remains to be seen, and also, how they will be welcomed by the Hill and lawmakers if and when Elon Musk and others may try to insert themselves going forward.
And Rachel Scott, you detected some boos when Mike Pence entered the room?
Exactly, David. So here at Capital One Arena, you have thousands of Trump supporters that have shown up. They are playing what we are watching here live on our screens here on the Jumbotrons. And as soon as Vice President Mike Pence, Trump's former vice president, showed up inside of the Capitol, we heard a very loud set of boos, which is pretty remarkable to hear for someone who served 4 years with President-elect Donald Trump in office. Mike Pence did put out a statement ahead of walking into the Capitol, and he said this is a day when American does what we do to celebrate our democracy and the peaceful transfer of power. We just have to remember exactly what Mike Pence did on January 6th. It is those core beliefs that he upheld that day, and it's a reason that brought him back to the Capitol again today.
So some boos at the arena where supporters of Donald Trump are gathered for what will replace the inaugural parade just a short time from now, early this afternoon. Of course, Rachel Scott, our eyes and ears there. She heard some boos when Mike Pence was up on the big screen. A different reception there in the hall, though he walked in alone. But as you can see, right here is another example. President Clinton and former First Lady Hillary Clinton. Let's listen. We watched this entrance in 2017. The former First Lady, former Secretary of State, who had hoped to make history as the first woman president, came so close. She won nearly 3 million in the popular vote. That was the margin, but did not win in the Electoral College, though even that was very close across 3 states. And these are the moments, Lindsay Davis, that are the test of democracy. Former President George W. Bush, former First Lady Laura Bush arriving too. And it was in 2017, Hillary Clinton sat next to George W. Bush, and the two of them made their own observations about what they saw play out that day, their initial reactions to the carnage speech, though they're back 8 years later because of their duty. And there you see Lara Trump, Eric's wife, arriving with their family. She's a rising star in the Republican Party, was considered for a short period of time to be a potential replacement for Marco Rubio in Florida, though that's no longer the case. And there you see former President Obama and arriving alone, Lindsay.
One thing that I'm mindful of is the American tradition. We have so many people who could run for president, but here you see when we saw George Bush, of course, he was there for his father's inauguration, then his own with Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. We had Bill Clinton run, then his wife run for president. Here you have Donald Trump at now his second return to the Capitol, now about to be sworn in as president. But one thing that I was struck by, and we talked about this earlier with regard to Chris Christie saying that the real criteria right now is loyalty. When we saw Mike Pence coming in, J.D. Vance has already said that if he had been in Mike Pence's shoes then in 2021, he would not have certified the results of the 2020 election. And I think that is so significant, right, in that when he was chosen, Donald Trump said loyalty really is paramount. And one thing that we're seeing also in a difference as we're looking at some of the cabinet members this time around, the last time many of his appointees were standard bearers. They were well known inside the Beltway, a lot of experience, and now we're seeing these outsiders, the Kash Patels, the Tulsi Gabbards, Pete Hegseth, RFK Jr., tapped for key roles in this administration. Quite a difference. Even when we're talking about these executive orders that we're hearing that he's going to sign, potentially 200 on day one. 4 years ago, he signed one executive order on day one.
Donald Trump did. 8 years ago, yeah.
8 years ago.
Yes. I know it's hard to, because he's back. It was just 8 years ago. There's Marco Rubio center screen. One notable thing about Marco Rubio in his confirmation process is in this deeply divided climate, he was welcomed by both sides of the party for his hearing just a few days ago. There you see RFK Jr. there in the center, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, of course, Pete Hegseth right there behind him, who also looks like he could very well
at this time,
land the role as head of the Pentagon. Pam Bondi there, Linda McMahon, Lara Trump, as I mentioned, ran the RNC, was pivotal in helping to sort of guide the party during this presidential election. You saw there for a time Susie Wiles at sort of the center screen for a bit. She is in white, and she is going to be the first woman to run the West Wing as chief of staff. And she has indicated to the president-elect, that she very much intends to keep that job for 4 years. She's going to work very hard. We know that that did not happen his first go-around. They did not last that long. There's Mark Zuckerberg right at the left of your screen as the camera pans. And Pete Hegseth on the phone in the back row there, Martha.
on the phone making last-minute calls for I cannot imagine what that is about. You know, one of the big differences, and Lindsay's right, they are all outsiders, but what they also are absolute loyalists to Donald Trump. Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing, I've never heard anything so political. Many questions were just, Donald Trump's going to be a great president, and he's the person who can do it, and Joe Biden didn't do a good job. So it was incredibly political. So when I think about the chaos